All right, I have my very simple React component on the right. It returns a single div that has the content of hi, and we can see the result over here on the left. I'm going to build this up, and we'll also show it in a tool called Babel, because this is JSX, and it gets translated into JavaScript. So luckily, there's the Babel people, Babel compiler, so this is the same organization, babeljs.io, that's responsible for the Babel transpiler that's built into our toolchain in React that changes this into JavaScript, translates it into ES5 for ultimate shipment to the user. Should work on older browsers, unless they're very old browsers. So let's look at the tool that these people provide, kind people at Babel. So we have this try it out, and I think this is for setting up projects up here. So we just need the editor here, expand it out so it looks like here. And I'll take this, and you can take your JSX code and translate it for you. Here's our JSX code, and here it gets translated into ES5. So remember, what you see on the right here is what your user base is going to get in terms of delivery to the browser. We write our code in convenient tags, especially if you know HTML. We're going to build this up to something more complex than a simple div, and you'll see the advantage of using this JSX language to express ourselves, which then gets translated into ES5 style JavaScript for older browsers, and cross compatibility. Remember, we write in the most modern script possible because we're within the React toolchain. So as JavaScript becomes modernized, React can stay up with it and continue to produce JavaScript, older JavaScript as a target. So I'm going to elaborate this example, and I'll show it to you. So I've added a local variable to my render method here, let punctuation equal ... And I've also added it to my Babel interpreter over here, let punctuation equal. Notice the translation. It's a direct translation to older version of JavaScript. We use the let keyword in the modern version of JavaScript because it obeys standard scoping rules for variable declarations, whereas var did not. But ES5 doesn't understand the let keyword for declaring variables, so it gets translated into var. We can write in modern script, and obeying modern rules, the modern rules are going to be applied, but then the transpiler writes it into older JavaScript for us. Very nice. So I've added the use of my variable punctuation here. And in order to call it out, I need to put it within curly braces. So once I'm within the tag language part of the JSX, I need to call out JavaScript expressions with the use of curly braces. And here I do it. So here I have the same thing copied over to my Babel interpreter. And notice it just adds it as a parameter here. So the content is going to be added onto here as you add additional elements here. This gets translated into a simple parameter call for the create React element. It's showing up on the screen as punctuation. Should be. Let's save the file. And there we see our punctuation. So I made a couple of modifications to my code. I added an array of integers, and then I used my array here, again calling it out within curly braces. And I've also added a sub element here, the horizontal rule element. And we see it's rendered over here. Let's look at it in Babel. So here I have this. And we notice we have the single create element still for our outer div, and that explains why we can only return one div here, or one element here, because it corresponds with a call to create a single call to create element, and it gets bigger and bigger as we nest things in it. Nested structure of HTML follows this exactly. So here we have our elements, punctuation, hi, null, punctuation. Here we have React create React element. So here we have a nested call to create React element for the horizontal rule. Okay. And it would have elements in here as well, embedded within it, if it does. Notice this is one big difference between coding in HTML and coding in this JSX tag language. It requires the end tag, and you can see as it's translating it into method calls, it really needs that for its syntax in order to be able to close it off and be able to translate it intelligently into a single method call. So here we have our call out to the array here, and we see it just doing the elements of the array all compressed together. So next I'm going to add some code to actually use the contents of the array and translate it into a little bit nicer user interface. Okay, so here's the code that can translate this array into a more friendly user interface element. We can get even better than this. Element 1, index 0, element 30, index 1, element 23, index 2. So essentially looping over this array and explaining the element values and their related indexes. Okay, so here's our code. Begin curly brace, end curly brace. Okay. We're within the tag language part of JSX. Therefore, we need to say we're going to go with a JavaScript expression. So array.map actually returns a JavaScript expression. Recall that it loops over every element in the array and calls a callback function here expressed as an arrow function with element and index as the two parameters. So now we're back to JSX and we emit a paragraph tag, in paragraph tag, and within it we call out element as we see here, and then we escape again, once again, to call out the JavaScript statement, element, and index. So the whole thing's within a JavaScript statement. Still has JSX in it here and here. And then to escape it, once we're in JSX, we need these JavaScript curly braces to get a JavaScript expression. Let's take a look at how Babel interpreted that. So I added this here, just like I added it here. And Babel interpreted it for us. So we have this, again, we're returning a single create element, and it gets more nested here. But you can see now, here's our call, array.map, and the arrow function is new syntax. So it uses the older syntax of an anonymous function method here, element body, and it translates it to this, return create React, nested call to create React element. What else would it do? Here's a create React element, here's a create React element, and then it puts the paragraph elements in there, an element, and then the parameter that came from the JavaScript variable here. So I think you can see from this relatively simple example and be grateful that we don't have to write our code like what's on the right here. All right, so that's our quick introduction to JSX. I think JSX is probably central to understanding how React works. I think it would form a fairly big part of your study to understand JSX. This is our introduction to it, but I think it'll make things a lot clearer as you develop your code. Thank you.